Hello everyone and happy Halloween. It's now time for my final story for Halloween 2012. I hope it's creepy and that you enjoy it. What really makes this story terrifying is that the person who committed the heinous crimes in this story is still on the loose to this day. I hope you enjoy the story. This story takes us up to Canada, to a lone college. 3 sorority sisters were spending Halloween night alone in the sorority house. It was Halloween weekend, Halloween night in fact, and all the rest of the sisters were out for the weekend, or out at least for the night, partying, spending time with their boyfriends, all those good things. Even the house mother had left for the weekend so she could go and spend time with her nephews and watch them trick-or-treat. So Phyllis, Barb, and Jess were left alone with the sorority house all to themselves. Earlier that week they had been plagued with some prank phone calls that were driving them crazy. If that wasn't enough, Jess had heard on the radio that in a neighboring town, some murders had been committed by a psychopathic killer who was still on the loose. Well, Barb, known for her heavy drinking, wasn't scared of anything, so she assured Jess there was nothing to worry about, and they were going to have a good time spending the night in the sorority house all by themselves. So that night they stayed in the front room when the sun went down, and they passed out candy to some of the kids from the nearby town who came trick-or-treating through the college campus. They took turns handing out the candy, and as the night grew on and the trick-or-treaters sort of went off and no more visitors were coming, Jess locked the door, and she and Barb and Phil sat by the crackling fire, catching up on their gossip time. Most of the talk was about Jess's crazy boyfriend who she had broken up with a few weeks before. He had stalked her a little bit, but with the help of security, she was keeping him at bay. Right in the middle of the conversation, the phone rang. Barb, sitting closest to the phone, answered it. And a weird, crazy, insane voice came over the line.
Billy! Billy! Agnes! Billy! Where did you put the baby?
The voice continued on, just speaking in weird tones and rattling off nonsense. It got on Barb's nerves, so being brass as she was, she chewed him out. You son of a... Nah. Get off this phone. Don't call here again. And she slammed the phone down on him. Phyllis, being the peacemaker, of course, turned to Barb and said, you were just a little bit mean to that guy. If there really is some nut, he might come out here and do something if he knows where we are. Barb just laughed at her. Ah, come on, Phyllis. It's just some nut prank calling like he's done all week. Although I must admit, that's the first time he's done voices. Usually it's just heavy breathing. Well, the girls continued with their conversation. Jess's mind wandered to the report she'd heard earlier about the murder in the nearby town, so she started talking about that. Barb quickly shushed her. Ah, come on, Jess. Whoever did that is long gone. There's nothing to worry about. And of course, Barb broke out the alcohol from the house mother's hidden stash and commenced in drinking away the night. Phyllis and Jess declined drinking and just watched her chug-a-lug away, when eventually the phone rang again. Barbara answered. Once again the voice shouted over the phone,
Billy! Billy! Agnes! Billy! What your mother and I must know is, where did you put the baby?
Again, the voice shouted nonsense, nothing of it making any sense at all. Once again, Barbara shouted at him, "You freak! You bleep bleep bleep! Quit calling here! Don't call here again or I'm calling the cops, you bleep bleep bleep!" And she slammed the phone down. Jess was starting to get a little bit unnerved. You know, usually in the past this guy's been breathing heavy. Maybe we should call the operator and see if we can get this to stop. It's getting kind of crazy. Barb just waved her hand at her, and the alcohol was taking a little bit of effect. Come on now, Jess. Nothing to worry about. You're just being a sissy. Well, Phyllis decided she had had enough of listening to Barb ranting and drinking, so she excused herself and decided to call it an early night. She ventured upstairs. Barb and Jess stayed by the fire. They heard what sounded like creaking noises across the floor upstairs, leading to Phil's bedroom, followed by a loud thump. Jess sort of sat up in the chair, and Barb looked at her like, "What's wrong with you?" Jess mentioned the noise, and Barb just waved a hand. "Oh, come on, you just saw Phyllis go up to bed. She probably went from brushing her teeth and flopped down the bed, and she's probably asleep. Don't worry about it." The phone jingled off the cradle again. This time, Jess answered it, keeping Barb in her chair, ensuring her that right now we don't need anyone cursing out this caller. Let me see if indeed this is the prankster and see what I can do. So she answered the phone, and once again the voice erupted.
Billy! Billy, where's the baby? Agnes. Agnes, it's me, Billy. Come out, Agnes, come out.
The voice went on like that for a minute, until Jess couldn't take it anymore and she hung up the phone. Again upstairs, she heard the creaking sound. This time she decided to go check on the situation, so she went upstairs and checked all the windows. Thought about the attic, but now the windows up there were too high up. There was a rose trellis that led up to the window, but there's no way anybody could climb up that thing. It would probably fall apart. So she came back downstairs, checked the front door and the back door, made sure everything was secure, and she came back to a laughing, drunk Barb, who, of course, made fun of her for being so anxious and letting her imagination go away with her. "You just gotta calm down. Why don't you have a drink and join me?" But Jess wasn't having any of that. Finally, Barb had gotten drunk enough to where she decided to go on upstairs and lay down in bed. So she climbed the stairs. As she made her way up, the phone rang once again. Jess answered it, and once again the voice chattered away.
Agnes, it's me, Billy. Agnes, don't tell anyone what I'm doing tonight.
This time he hung up. Well, Jess had had enough, so she called the operator and let her know what was going on. That all week they'd have some calls from heavy breathers, and they thought it was the boys in the nearby sorority. But tonight someone was calling and making all sorts of rants and raves, and it was getting very scary. Well, the operator assured her they could take care of it. She asked Jess, "Are there any other lines in the house?" Jess answered, "Well, there's only one other line, but that's the house mother's room, and she's not here this weekend, and we haven't gotten any calls on that line. It's just this one downstairs." So the operator assured her that she would place a tap on the line, but told Jess, "You need to keep the guy on the line at least a few minutes so we can get the trace in." Well, Barb went on upstairs and lay down on the bed. Jess decided to stay up by the crackling fire, and because she was just too anxious to go to bed, and she wanted to see if this guy would call again, see if they could finally put a stop to this. Eventually, she heard the creaking noises again across the upstairs floor. This time they led to Barb's room, followed by thump. "Well," she said to herself and kind of chuckled, "I guess Barb finally made it to the bed and collapsed. I'm not going to worry about it." Several seconds went by until the phone once again jingled off the cradle. Jess reached out and answered the phone. This time, the caller on the other end was in full force.
Agnes, Agnes, I'm gonna get you, and I'm gonna rip you apart. I want your blood all over me.
The voice went on and on. Jess could barely stand listening to him describe macabre, horrible visions and ranting on in that voice, talking about Billy and Agnes. Who were these people? After a few minutes went by, the caller finally hung up. Jess, in a state of shock, listened on the other end. She finally eased the phone back to the cradle and waited for a few minutes. The phone rang again. Oh no. Jess reached out and took it in her hand and answered it, but this time, to her relief, it was the operator. The relief didn't last long. Jess, we've traced the call. Put down the phone and get out of the house. I've called the police and they're on their way. What are you talking about, Jess, the operator? The call is coming from inside the house. Put the phone down and get out. Jess let the phone drop from her hand as she stood there in shock. She turned toward the door and made her way toward it, but being the good friend she was, she couldn't leave Phil and Barb. She turned toward the stairs and called out to them, but there was no answer. Swallowing and taking a deep breath, she made her way up the stairs. Not the smartest move, she knew, but she had to get Phil and Barb out of there. She made it to the top of the stairs. From the landing, she could see Barb's room, the door wide open. Barb was nowhere to be seen inside. Phyllis's door was closed. Jess took a few steps toward it and reached out with a shaking hand. She took the knob and turned it. Easing the door open, she looked into the dark bedroom. Her eyes adjusted and she saw Phyllis, and she found Barb there too, in bed. What were they doing in bed together? As her eyes adjusted, she could see that their bodies weren't laying there asleep. In fact, they were twisted around each other in a macabre pose. Blood splattered all over the sheets. Their throats slit from ear to ear. Stab wounds through their chests. Jess stood frozen as she beheld the sight before her. The awful, hideous sight, and then, from behind her, that voice.
Agnes. Agnes, it's me, Billy.
Slowly turning, Jess looked at the bedroom door and she could see through the crack a large form standing behind the door, peering out, one large eye bulging.
Don't tell anyone what I did, Agnes.
Reacting the best way she could, Jess slammed the door against the figure. He howled in pain. Oh! Jess fled out of the bedroom, down the stairs, to the front door. She tried to open it, but it was stuck. She couldn't get it open. Grabbing a poker from the fireplace, she ran to the basement doorway, threw it open, and ran inside, slamming it behind her as she heard the footfalls pounding down the stairs after her, the man howling in pain. She locked the basement door and listened as he slammed against it and roused it, trying to open.
Let me in! Let me in!
Eventually, she heard the footsteps walk toward the front door. With considerable ease, he was able to slam it open and walk out. Jess made her way down the basement stairs and looked around. Outside the windows, she saw a figure walking around past the windows of the basement. She held tight to the poker, waiting to see what would happen. Then she heard her name called.
Jess. Jess, what are you doing in there? Let me in, Jess. What's going on?
The stranger kicked the window open and climbed inside, letting himself drop down to the floor. Jess cowered behind some storage boxes as she watched him make his way into the basement. As her eyes adjusted, she realized her boyfriend stood there looking around. "Jess, what are you doing down here? I saw you running here when I was outside. Where are you?" Jess eased out from behind the boxes, making her way behind him, finding the moment just right. She raised the poker and brought it down hard against the back of his head, brought it down again and again and again as she killed her attacker. Sirens wailed through the night as the police finally arrived outside the house and made their way in. They found Jess in the basement, laying there cradling the body of her dead boyfriend, blood gushing from his head, from the wounds that she had created. The sheriff carried Jess up to her bedroom as he called the doctor's office. The doctors back in those days still made house calls, so the doctor made his way out there quickly and checked on Jess. They took her boyfriend's body out in the body bag and they put Jess in her own bed, and the doctor diagnosed her with shock, but she seemed to be okay other than that. He gave Jess a tranquilizer so she could sleep, while the sheriff called her parents on the phone to let them know what had happened. The bodies of Phil and Barb were taken out. By that time, the media started showing up outside, so the sheriff excused himself along with the doctor. They closed Jess's bedroom door and left, leaving one of the cops posted outside the front door. They went on to take care of the media and try to get them away. Jess lay alone there in her bedroom, the house now quiet. She slept heavily, very heavily. She didn't hear the footsteps creaking across the floor in the attic. She didn't hear the attic door ease open. She didn't hear the footsteps climbing down the ladder from the attic doorway. She didn't hear those footsteps creak down the hallway toward her bedroom door, or her bedroom door ease open. She didn't hear the approaching to her bedside. But what she did hear, the last thing she heard, that familiar, terrifying voice.
Agnes. Agnes, it's me, Billy. Don't tell anyone what I did tonight.
Thank you so much for watching. I want to dedicate this video to the memory of Bob Clark. May he rest in peace. And I just want to wish you all a safe and happy Halloween 2012. Keep watching my channel. I'll be posting more stories as I'm able to. Next month I'll try to share some Thanksgiving stories and then get into some good Christmas stories. But I hope you enjoyed my scary Halloween tales, and I look forward to sharing more in the future. Good night, God bless,
And nighty night.